Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Bill Murphy is a nationally recognized mortgage originator who has closed over $1.5 billion in loans and been a top producer for 25 years. He's a marathoner, ultramarathoner, Ironman finisher. He's raised over $500,000 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he actively supports a number of charities, including Fairway Cares, the American Warrior Initiative, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Thrive Foundation. Bill will be the first to tell you that he's nothing special, but he's been able to overcome an abusive childhood, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health challenges, and unexpected crises to finish an Ironman and run the Boston Marathon 5 times, including one on crutches. He's a regular guy who is now thriving at the top of his profession. And in Thriving in the Storm, his new book, he explains how you can achieve similar success. I was hoping you could start us off by telling us a little bit about how you got into the work you do that's informed in your book and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, wow. There was a couple of concepts that we started with. Just there was a culmination of years of notes and journaling that I put together over the years. And I grew up in an environment where I was always made to feel less than and not capable enough. And for some reason, not that I was talented growing up, but I would say I'll show them, even as a young kid, and just perform things out of sheer will. And that was kind of the mentality that, anything, we're capable of anything, no matter what God-given talent we have. And that was on, whether it was athletics, academics, what have you. In addition to that, when I finished the book up, I was understanding what a thriving mentality was. And I came up with 3 mentalities. And the lowest level of mentality that we have is victim mentality. And victim mentality is when, you're going to bang snooze 5 times and not get out of bed and not put your feet on the floor because you don't have any reason, or you find some reason, excuse, circumstance that may have you down and out where you can't feel like you can get through your day. I mean, there's survival, mentality. That's the second phase of this, where maybe you can put your feet on the floor, but you're just going to coast and get through it until that storm or adversity that you're in passes. And then there's a thriving mentality. And that's where I think it's kind of like a self-actualization, when you can really perform on a high level in spite of the adversity or the circumstances that were thrown at you. Now, there may be, some severe situations where you have to process and maybe even grieve some circumstances. But in order to have that thriving mentality, I really believe you have to change your mindset. So if we start with a victim mentality, right, you're usually going to have feelings, very low level emotional feelings. Those low level emotional feelings may be sadness, grief, anger, hostility, vengeance, whatever is there. It's usually in the pit of your stomach, where you just don't feel like getting through it, right? So I found that if you start to channel those emotions pretty easily into gratitude and blessings, which are usually things in our lives that are free, it can instantly change that physiology within your body, and then you're able to create. So let's just play it out here. You're down and out because you had a couple of rough days, or you're not meeting your sales quota at work, or you got into a fight with a colleague, or your spouse, or your kids, or whatever, and you're just not in a great place. Well, if you start to give thanks for your health, for your kids, for your job, for the other things that you have that you can appreciate, then that's going to instantly change how you tackle the day. And when you're able to go through that at a higher level, you're able to create. And now you can create problem solving. Now you can create ways to get out of your adversity as quickly as you can. And that's kind of how we came up with that thriving in the storm, those three layers of mentality.
So are there tricks that you've learned for getting from the victim mentality up into the survival, or from the survival up into the thriving?
Oh yeah. So I say build your fortress. Building your fortress is really, really preparing your day and ending your day. So it's a bookend. When you prepare your day, it is the gratitude, it is the journaling, it is the meditation. I mean, these things can take under 10 minutes. It's not a long process if you don't want it to be, or you could spend a lot more time doing it. Maybe it's deep breathing, just to get into a good mindset. I believe that physical activity for me is working out in the morning. Making sure your day's already prepared. So that goes to the night before. The night before is a little bit of gratitude, a little bit of journaling, eliminating distractions. Let's not put on the news. Let's not binge watch Netflix into the early hours of the morning. Let's kind of wind down, get the room dark, shut off the lights, and kind of settle out the mind that way. So then when you do get up in the morning, you're in a much better place. So those are kind of the ways we bookend the day, and it helps. Now, when that adversity, maybe you start the day off great, but then you have an adversity in the middle of the day. Because you just went through this great routine, you got the endorphins, you got the dopamine, you got all these great feelings already within you. You're able to withstand the adversity that may come at you, where someone else that had a rough night, maybe they had 3 glasses of wine, maybe they binge watched some TV, and maybe they got into a fight with their spouse before they went to bed. They started their morning off late, and then some adversity, some circumstances happen in the middle of the day. They're going to be less likely to handle whatever stressors come at them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, low energy is like a pandemic in our culture, because we're not eating food that energizes the body. Most people aren't exercising the way their bodies were designed to exercise. And most people are some level or another between your victim mentality and your survival mentality. And because we're trained to think, I mean, we have phrases in our culture: you made me angry, you hurt my feelings, you're scaring me, you're offending me, as though the outside event or what someone else does causes my emotions. And so we're conditioned to think that way. So absolutely, it is an energy drain when you're living in that range of mentalities, from the victim to the survival.
Yeah. And actually, we were talking earlier before we started with a podcast that you had, Jeff Susak, and he mentioned, and this is so true, he mentioned that 85% of our thoughts are repetitive, daily repetitive, and or negative. Now, to take that a step further, research says that 85 to 90% of those thoughts are worry thoughts. And only 10% of those worry thoughts that we think happen. And when they do happen, it's never as bad as we thought they were going to be. And then to take that a step further, we think the same worry thoughts the next day. 85 to 95% of our thoughts are repetitive or worry. So if you can break that cycle, this is a really hard trick. You mentioned what's a trick. If you could recognize and bring into your awareness, your consciousness, what am I thinking right now? What am I thinking at this time? What am I thinking first thing in the morning? And you can catch yourself. And a lot of times it's very natural for us to think about all the stressors, the problems, fitting enough things into our schedule or not fitting enough things into our schedule, or too much stuff into our schedule, or how am I going to get all this done? And we worry about it. and it never comes true. So we waste our time worrying. And that's not, you're not in a creative mindset when you're worrying. It's bringing you down.
Yeah, it reminds me of the book Happy for No Reason and the Happiness Project, both of which are talking about gratitude lists and the breath work and the reframing of a situation to either a neutral or a positive. These are things that research has shown over and over again. If we were willing to put some effort into it, some mind energy into it, they yield results. And they yield results in terms of people's self-reported happiness levels.
Yeah. We coast. We coast throughout our day too often.
And there's a tendency to think that what it is that our mind tells us we want, which we don't realize has been programmed by our family and our culture and the news and the TV. But we have a tendency to think that what our mind tells us we want is going to bring us a lot more energy, a lot more happiness, a lot more good feeling than it actually brings when it gets here. So we chase after things from the outside to try and get an internal experience rather than learning how to create that internal experience in our own mind-body energy system.
You are spot on with that. Absolutely. You create from within.
So we've got breathing, breath work. People know how to do that. If you don't, you can, find a therapist, find a yoga teacher, go to Wim Hof. Wim Hof has a very energizing technique you can watch on YouTube. I teach people one of those breathing techniques that helps bring you into that parasympathetic system by just holding the breath at the top for a few seconds and resisting the exhale. There's a shift necklace. There are a whole series of these little necklaces you can buy. They're simply little tubes, and if you breathe out through the tube, it restricts the airflow so that your exhale is longer. There's all these good things people know to do. What are some of the other things you've learned that can help somebody shift either their internal experience or their thoughts?
So I'm a big exercise enthusiast. And if you're not, at least get out in nature and walk. You don't necessarily have to go run a marathon or a 5K, but you could go walk and enjoy, go to a place, whether it's early in the morning, and go try to find beauty or nature, or go for a trail walk, or where you can take that in, because that will change your physiology as well. And while you're doing that, and if you're present, you can observe a lot in nature, and that will transform how you're feeling as well, by just taking in a nature walk, for example. I get my best ideas, my biggest rushes, dopamine, adrenaline, endorphins when I go on my long runs or trail runs, or I'll take the dog or whatever, or even on the beach, whatever the case is. Those long distances, I do a lot of triathlon, so the biking and the running really do well. But I like to hike too, in nature, so I get some incredible ideas. And a lot of times I'll take those ideas that I got on the walk and I'll record them right in my phone, which I put together for the book. A lot of those were recorded messages over the years of training for the marathons and the Ironmans and things. And then I would record them, or I'd come home and I would journal them. And then you go back and you look at what you journaled, and some of the amazing feelings and emotions and thoughts and ideas that came to you is pretty mind-blowing.
You mentioned doing triathlons. What drives you to work at that level? How many have you done, and what do you think is driving you to do that level of physical exercise?
Well, I love the feeling. I'm on my third Ironman. I've done like 5 or 6 marathons and ultra marathons. And I love the training. I love the commitment. I love I never used, so this was a transformation for me. I never used to appreciate the journey. I would always want to get to the finish line and what's next. I found over the years that the training is the journey where you can learn so much about yourself and what you're capable of, and pushing those limits a little bit, where you can appreciate and celebrate those small victories. Hey, you know what? I didn't feel like running 5 miles today, and I went and did it. And wow, I feel so much better now that I did it. And so that's kind of, we started this whole thing off about your mentality. That's your thriving mentality. Doing the things that you know you should do, don't feel like doing them, but doing them anyways. Watch the magic happen and how you feel afterwards. It's amazing.
You make the commitment to do, let's say, a marathon for what? What is your hope to gain through that process?
I run all my marathons for charity, for Make-A-Wish right now, and I've been doing that for 15 years or so. The Ironmans, have done a couple for charity. So I do a lot of these things with charities in mind. If I don't do them for charity, I'm doing those because it's a goal that is transformational. When I get to the other side, I learned so much about myself and what I'm capable of, and by pushing those limits a little bit. And then I learned to celebrate those victories while I'm in the process. Before I never used to realize that. I never really appreciated it. It would be like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? And a lot of people in life and business, I mean, they high achievers are always on to what's next. And I find that when you start to appreciate things, when you push yourself in any walk of life, you're able to feel better about yourself and not have as much stress when you can see what you're capable of and enjoying the process.
Well, and the thing I was hoping you'd say is what you're driving at here is that you end up being a different person after you put yourself through the paces, gradually grow with your conditioning, strength, etc., and then accomplish it, so that the next marathon you do, you're not like the person you were the last time. It's a building process. You're growing into learning about yourself every time you set a commitment and then work toward it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the other why of all that, when you ask the question, is I try to model for my kids. My kids are 22, 19. My son's 22. My daughters are 19 and 16. And I've been able to provide for them at a nice level, but I want to show the legacy piece. And that's about giving back and making a difference and being significant in society. And so when I commit to the marathon, I want them to help us raise that money. And as a matter of fact, they just signed up for the Providence Marathon next year for Make-A-Wish. It was pretty cool. I'm going to run with two of my kids for Make-A-Wish in the Providence Marathon. Last year, I was running for Boston Marathon for Make-A-Wish, and it was in October. They usually have it on Patriots Day in April. I had torn my quad 60 days prior to, walking down my stairs on my way to a training run. And they were basically, Boston Marathon was kicking me out, and because they weren't going to allow me to either limp, wheelchair, or crutch the marathon along the route because of liability reasons. So Make-A-Wish helped me secure a place at my old alma mater, Wichita State College, and we had use of the track and the football field. So I was able to, 60 days after having surgery on the torn quad, I was able to crutch a marathon. And I remember talking to a lot of people and said, what do you have to prove? You don't need to do this. And I said, but these kids that are going through this critical illness, they don't have the choice to go through this critical illness. I have a choice I can make right now. And what this will do will bring a lot more awareness to Make-A-Wish Foundation. And we'll be able to probably bring awareness and raise a lot more money. And so, my kids were a part of that fundraising. And that was kind of the driving factor, because I said I was going to do it. I was going to figure out a way, but it was, if I didn't have the why of doing what I said I was going to do for the foundation and to my kids, I probably wouldn't have done it. So when you declare what you're going to do, you just built up all your accountability partners for you. So with that being said, tell people your goals, tell people what you want to accomplish, tell the ones, and be very careful, tell the people that are going to support you and lift you up so you can achieve that, and they have your back. And so that's, that was kind of the whole why piece when you were asking me why I would do the marathons and things. It's usually for charity, and it's to bring awareness and set an example.
So do you find that when you move from that victim mentality to that survival mentality and then up to that thriving mentality, do you find that once you get to thriving mentality, you just stay there? Or do you have challenges? Do you have setbacks? And if so, how do you address those?
Well, every day is every day is the process of getting to the thriving mentality if you don't wake up that way. Like I said, we think the same worry thoughts over and over again. So you have to catch yourself and be aware of it. When you get the repetition and the routine down, it's easier to thrive, but you still have to work at it. We all have bad days. I mean, everybody has bad days. It's not all what Facebook shows us is this wonderful smiling family at all times. There's always trials and tribulations you have to get through. There's bad days you have to deal with it. But if you're thriving, you're able to move a lot faster because you're not giving up and being a victim to those circumstances. You're like, hey, you know what? We got this problem at work. I'm going to get everybody I can involved that can be organized in helping us break through this issue that we have, or we're gonna huddle up. We're gonna figure this out. Or family, we got this small little crisis on our hands, and let's get together and figure out what we can do, rather than saying, throwing your hands up and saying, we're not gonna be able to do this. Sorry, and not trying. Even in a thriving mentality, you're still gonna fail, but you got to just keep failing ahead, failing forward, so you can keep moving through it. It's not a straight line to that goal. There's a lot of zigging, zagging, and falling down along the way to get there.
Yeah, I was just put to mind of one of the speakers, a motivational spiritual speakers, that said, she was giving a talk and she said to these business leaders, you're going to need to fail to really move forward, to really learn and grow. And so you need to be able to fail in order to do that. And at the end of the talk, this gentleman came up to her and he said, I am absolutely willing to risk failure. And she said, no, you misunderstood what I said. She said, and the guy went white as a sheet when she said it, but she said, you need to fail. Not just put yourself, I'm going to be willing to risk failure. And then I do everything I can to succeed and I never fail. I do everything I can to succeed and I blame the failure on somebody else. She says, you have to be willing to actually fail. You have to fail to learn. So if you keep doing what you're already good at and just do more and more and more of it, her take was you don't have any setbacks and you don't really have that much growth because you're doing what you're already good at.
I love that. With the thriving mentality, you're getting up a little bit faster. You're moving forward a little bit faster after you fail. But I totally agree with that.
Well, and what I like about what you're talking about is you're identifying, here's what the victim mentality looks like. Here's what the survival mentality looks like. Here are the clues that'll tell you that you're in that one. And here's what the thriving mentality looks like. So when you start recognizing, oh, I'm having some kind of just skate by thoughts or mentality, or I'm starting to slip into the victim mentality, I can recognize it and choose to go to the next level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many times when people are stuck, right? So I do some coaching, business and life, and I work with some producers. And the one thing that I notice is if you work with them long enough, they get stuck, even though you never see it. And the things that they get stuck on is just, it's mind blowing. These are people that are thriving all the time, right? So you say, how can you thrive all the time? We have to unpack why are you stuck? And it could be self-doubt. It could be unworthiness. It could be fear of failure, like we just talked about. It could be fear of success. It could be anything. And we have to get unstuck and still continue to thrive. I was just talking to a gal today, and everything, she's having a career year in business, and everything was doom and gloom. Well, this person messed this up, and this person messed this up, and this person isn't really that good, and this and this and this. And so it was just a bunch of blaming. And I asked her, and I said, there's a pattern here, and we've been talking, and you just made about 10 excuses on why things were so bad, even though you have it really good and you're doing really well. And you were just in a blame victim mentality. And then she thought for a minute, got a little defensive, and then thought for a minute. She says, you know what? This is why I've been in a rut for the last week, because I just think everybody is screwing up, and it's me. So we just got to recognize when we're in that rut, and it's human. We're going to go through it. We're not, you can't be positive 100% of the time. You're going to have, here's our slip and fall, right? You're going to fall down, and you're going to get a little jaded or negative or even scorned to a bit. I mean, whatever the case may be, or why me?
And as you're talking about there, it reminds me of the Gay Hendricks book, The Big Leap.
Yeah.
And he talks about, we have these upper limit problems, these upper limit beliefs, these upper limit trip ups, which it sounds like, the woman you were dealing with in this example, having a career year. And yet now, as I move up to that higher level, another belief or limiting belief within me starts to reveal itself. And unless I'm able to say, okay, what am I afraid of in terms of succeeding at a higher level? Or what am I afraid of in terms of confronting that insecurity that I had buried? Unless I'm willing to look at that, I stay stuck. And as you were saying, this woman, got
great book.
All these other beliefs about why I'm stuck, other than what's going on in here.
So to take that a step further, just to give you really where the story was, and because we all go through it, right? She was basically being promoted in her position. And I think, well, we kind of talked about it. It appears that she's just so scared of what's next. She almost was trying to keep herself down.
Yeah.
She was subconsciously keeping herself down and blaming and playing the victim, because I think she was afraid of what's on the other side, even though she was ready for it. So we have to work through that, but it's pretty interesting how that affects us all.
And if you learn to identify first the victim mentality, and then the survival mentality, and then the thriving mentality, you can start to recognize when you're slipping out of the thriving mentality, and then you might look for, okay, what are some of these upper limit beliefs that I might have that I'm bouncing into? But
absolutely,
the key has got to be the internal thing. As you're saying, if I'm blaming someone or something outside of me, it could be, I could set it up in my mind that I recognize, oh, Tim, you're slipping back into the victim mentality. And then I can reframe it and take a look at, okay, well, how am I creating the excuse or the blame here?
Yeah. And so in coaching, and you're well more versed at this than I am, Dr. Tim, but I had to do a lot of active listening. And I just said, are you hearing a pattern? Because I'm hearing a pattern. Because I didn't want to say, why are you blaming everybody? Because I would have lost her. I almost did lose her. But, so this is where your craft would come in and guiding her to where she needed to go. But it was just like, hey, there's a pattern here, and it maybe has to do with you going to the next level and being a little scared. And so it was just one of those aha moments.
Gay Hendricks, and other people talk about it, but Gay Hendricks, especially in his book, The Big Leap, he points out that a lot of our physical discomfort, a lot of our illnesses, in quotes, are a manifestation of us hitting one of those upper limit problems or beliefs within us. And the one example that popped into my head was he had a friend as a colleague at a university when he was developing these ideas. And the friend was supposed to be making a presentation this one morning to the rest of the faculty about some new research that he was planning. And he showed up and he had really intense laryngitis. He basically had no voice. It was cracking and it was whispering. And so he went and told the president of the university, and he said, I understand, no problem. And we'll do something else in this meeting other than what you're supposed to do. And Gay Hendricks pulled his friend aside and said, can we talk a little bit here first? Because Gay knew what was going on with this gentleman. And what was going on was he'd been in academia for a long time, and he was about to make the transition into the private sector with some of his ideas and his, patents, et cetera. But he didn't have signed contracts in the private sector, so he didn't want to tell the people at the university yet. And he didn't really want to stand up in front of his colleagues and promote all of this stuff that he thought he probably wouldn't be there to work through with them. So Gay points that out to him. And in the conversation with Gay Hendricks, his voice comes back. Just full, strong, clear.
Absolutely.
As though there wasn't any disease process, in quotes.
Right.
And we find that time and time again, whether it's back pain or neck pain, or I'm coming down with something. But if I identify where have my thoughts been going? Did I just drop out of that thriving mentality, drop into survival, or drop into victim? Have I been spinning this way for a few days or a few hours? If I'm willing to look at that stuff, I might find some of my aches and pains falling away, some of my laryngitis is clearing up, et cetera.
Yeah. So interesting that you say that. So you just brought out a great point. If we have these thoughts and emotions that we store that can make us sick, let's flip that around. What can help us become well and, you said, thrive and self-actualize or be in the upper limit or whatever, and get out of that? It's just that process of switching that off. And you actually reminded me of when I was a kid, and kids do this. I'm sick. I don't want to go to school. I'm sick. They kind of make themselves sick, right? And adults do it too. And so you feel sick. But I used to, school was the lesser evil of the choices of staying home. So I would, if I didn't feel good, I was going to go to school no matter what, no matter how sick I was. So I said, I feel better. And I would start to feel better going to school because I didn't want to stay home because of my environment. You just pointed out that beautifully with the guy with laryngitis. He created that and then was able to change it once he was able to be okay with his feelings and his thoughts.
Yeah. And you could say he created it, or you could say his body created it, or his energy system came up with it to help him hide what he didn't want to face. And so if you think about it in terms of, well, I'm generating all of these upsets, these aches and pains, these upper limit problems because I don't want to look at something. What's the solution? I want to be willing to look at whatever it is. I want to be willing to do the tapping, the breathing, the journaling. I want to be willing to ask my body, what do you need from me? What are you trying to tell me with this backache or whatever? And then be willing to see what comes to the surface and then treat it as though it has some value. More often than not, the energy system, your body, your mind, the whole thing, it will talk to you if you ask it.
It will.
Well, so let's just assume we're just about out of time here. Let's assume we can take a breath and get centered. And let me ask you, what's an aspect of the book that we haven't talked about yet, or an aspect of something we've already put out there that you want to highlight before we wrap this up?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it's very important. So I mentioned rough childhood, being capable of more, getting to that thriving mentality. So chapter 1 in that book is make peace with your past. And it's not my own shortcomings, which is part of it. But it's the people that in my life that I felt wronged by that I forgave. And forgiveness can give you so much. You can be so empowered when you can forgive those. If you stuff that in and you just have this ill will or this grudge and you carry that around, you want to talk about making yourself sick. Like that will do it. So when I say make peace with your past, make peace with your past and forgive yourself for anything that you may be punishing yourself on,
really, yes.
But also those that you feel that didn't do you right or justice or may have had their own shortcomings with you. Give grace and understand that there's always a story. And so when I was able to do that a few years ago, I took counseling psychology and got my master's degree because I wanted to understand why my childhood was so screwed up with my home environment. And I really want to understand what was going on there. It wasn't until a few years ago I was saying, you know what, I need to forgive all that. I can't, that's baggage I can't hold on to because that's bringing me down. So the second you're able to do that, wow, you just watch the transformation when you can let go and you talk about breathe and forgive everybody, forgive yourself and be okay and give grace. Wow. It's life-changing.
Well, and you, when you bring it up that way, it makes me think, it is not possible for me to sit here with bitterness and resentment and vengeance about people in the past and then do the thing I need to, what you were talking about earlier of gratitude and, moving forward into that thriving level. I can't do them both at the same time.
A negative and a positive thought at the same time is pretty hard to do.
Yeah. Well, so again, give us the title of the book and how people can access it.
Yeah, Thriving in the Storm, wherever books are sold. Amazon's pretty easy to get to. They can reach me on my website, thrivinginthestorm.com. Love to hear from folks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. I look forward to finishing the book and good luck in your next adventure.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Bill Murphy is a nationally recognized mortgage originator who has closed over $1.5 billion in loans and been a top producer for 25 years. He's a marathoner, ultramarathoner, Ironman finisher. He's raised over $500,000 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he actively supports a number of charities, including Fairway Cares, the American Warrior Initiative, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Thrive Foundation. Bill will be the first to tell you that he's nothing special, but he's been able to overcome an abusive childhood, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health challenges, and unexpected crises to finish an Ironman and run the Boston Marathon 5 times, including one on crutches. He's a regular guy who is now thriving at the top of his profession. And in Thriving in the Storm, his new book, he explains how you can achieve similar success.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.